Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, lots going on in the state capitol. Plus, we'll get a little Penn State update and Medicaid expansion. How will it take place? And then coming up, we'll hear from the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, get an energy update. All of that and more follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, joining me, as often is the case, are two of the state's leading reporters. Sitting across from me is Amy Worden with the Philadelphia Inquirer and Charlie Thompson with the Patriot News PennLive. All right, today before I let you out of the studio, we want to do at least two big things. We want to get a Medicaid expansion. There's a big fight brewing about how to do Medicaid expansion. It involves 600,000 people. Amy Worden shaking her head. And then Charlie Thompson, who's been covering a lot of the Penn State situations. Are we going to rehash and review a previous report, and where does that go? Amy, let's start with you. Medicaid expansion, it's underway, but maybe not for long.
But maybe
Explain
not. Yeah, the Corbett Medicaid Expansion Alternative Plan is the train on the tracks that is now gaining motion, and it is heading forward. For a little bit of background, Governor Corbett was initially one of the number of Republican governors who resisted outright Medicaid expansion. Last year, he slightly shifted on that and said, we'll do Medicaid expansion, but we want to do it our way. We want to use Medicaid or federal dollars to pay for private insurance through private providers. So that just got approved in August by the feds. And so they began to move forward with this that would, cover, as you said, 600,000 people. But part of their plan was to reform Medicaid in total, so 2.2 million people existing on Medicaid. So that's the part of the controversial piece. They move forward to the election. Corbett is out, and Governor-elect Wolf comes in, and he's immediately saying, I'm going to dismantle this. So you have the two sides on a collision course, just as enrollment is supposed to begin for Pennsylvania's Medicaid program. December 1st.
Going on the federal insurance exchange, actually buying the insurance, right?
Yeah, and on December 1st, Governor Wolf takes office in January and has said, he will begin to take this apart. So it's really unclear at this point.
And there are reports circulating that it may be up to 6 months before it could be halted or stopped. Right. Are you aware of that? Or
only on the periphery. I'll defer to Amy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like making changes in federal policy is like turning a massive cruise ship in a tight harbor. So it takes a while, it's unclear how that transition would take place. But certainly you've got hundreds of thousands of people in the balance.
All right, we're going to shift gears a minute, and then a couple of subjects we're going to talk about in common. Penn State. The president of Penn State University says, I'm going to review the Free report.
Yes.
That was that controversial report. The trustees hired Louis Freeh, FBI director. He comes out with a report that says Penn State administrators were involved in a cover-up, may have been involved, a certain football coach, Joe Paterno.
Right.
After all these years, they're reviewing it?
Yes.
Explain that.
Okay. Well, the context for that is that, as you know, the Free report has been a real wedge issue in the Penn State nation for 2 years now, because there have been those that have felt that former Judge Freeh simply didn't have the evidence to support his conclusions. So they've been hammering away for 2 years to try to get the Board of Trustees to reopen the Free report and or renounce it. And as recently as this fall, the group of alumni elected trustees that have been really carrying the water at the board level on that issue
They've expanded the board. They've expanded the board.
Well,
right?
They're in the process of that.
Okay.
But they hold 9 seats of a 30-member board, and they forced the issue in October to a vote. And as predicted, they were defeated by like a 17-9, 18-9 margin, with the majority saying, we hear your complaints about the free report, but we don't feel like we're in a position to really reopen the books on that until after the criminal charges against Graham Spanier and company, which deal with the same issues,
which could
are
be
adjudicated.
100 years from now at the way in which those those things
I
are
would
going,
bet if it is actually going to go to trial, I would bet it would happen next year.
Yeah, next year, okay.
That, they finally had a debate at the Board of Trustees level on the free report, and the people that wanted to revisit it were defeated. But President Barron, the new man on the scene at Penn State, is maybe showing the wisdom of Solomon. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe he's opening up a can of worms that he's going to be sorry he ever touched.
He's going to do it himself?
He came back at this month's board meeting and said, look, I know what a wedge issue this is, and I'm going to conduct a presidential review of the free report, and I will report to the board if there's things that were wrong with the free report or incomplete, and he's going to go through all the memos and emails and interview transcripts and We're going to run to a break, but the other thing is the controversy over the NCAA sanctions, which the NCAA has walked back on, and we got court action based, barreling toward a trial in January.
We got a court action, so it continues. All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to ask both of them about, will the legislature do anything before Tom Wolf takes office on January 20? There's a 2-week window. And what about these new leaders in the legislature? What does it mean for Governor-elect Wolf's agenda? We'll find out in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Amy Worden and Charlie Thompson are here, both reporters, both cover state capitol, and one of them hangs out up at State College covering a lot of the Penn State activities. All right, let's talk a little bit about these legislative leaders. We know what happened on Election Day. The legislature is more Republican than it was before the election, and new leadership elections, we're trying to figure out if that's more conservative. But more importantly, Amy Worden, what does that mean for Governor-elect Wolf?
Well, yeah.
That's a big question, right?
Well, I think the general consensus is he's going to have a tougher legislature to work with. I mean, the majorities are solidly Republican, and the emphasis and the philosophy seems to be further to the right than it was under certainly in the Senate under the prior leader. So he's going to be up against some tough battles with the Senate. Now,
Charlie, what was fascinating was Governor Corbett had trouble getting his agenda through. Right. Not arguably a conservative legislature. Governor-elect Wolf has a more, let's be honest, ambitious agenda. Yeah. Do you agree with Amy? I mean, it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could either go one of two ways. I mean, there could be sort of like constant gridlock where only the bare minimum gets done, like a budget gets passed at some point during the summer.
At some point, right.
Or it may, I mean, I wouldn't bet a lot of money on this, but it may open the door to some great era of deal making where maybe Wolf says, I will agree to phase out of the state store system if you agree to a Marcellus shale tax or something like that. I mean, that's all hypothetical right now.
I understand, but or modernization of the system. I mean, Republicans.
He's more likely to go there.
Yeah, and Republicans in the Senate have been on record, some of them, by modernizing we mean you keep the state-owned stores, but you expand the sale of beer and
More Sunday hours.
and
that sort of
spirits. You know, we don't call them, call them whiskey and bourbon in this state. They're called, am I right, Amy? We
Right.
call them spirits.
Right.
Does that make sense? I mean, it seems to resonate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to say at this point. I think Governor-elect Wolf, if you take the Medicaid topic again, he's made clear his position on that. So I
shale
think,
tax,
and he's made clear his position on shale tax. He wants a shale tax. So yes, as Charlie said, there may
Maybe
be
a
more
little
room
trade here.
for deal making here. But at the same time, I think there are probably going to be a lot of issues that are going to cause some intense battles.
All right, look, there's all these rumors circulating will there or won't they? The will they or won't they has to do with this 2-week window when the legislature comes back before Governor-elect Wolf takes office. Governor Corbett's still in office. Does the legislature do anything?
Yeah, I guess we've always talked about the lame duck session of the legislature, and now we're talking about the lame duck life of the governor having some meaning, because here's a newly elected legislature, presumably has the voters' will behind it, and could they try to enact some major Republican-backed policy initiatives while they still have a Republican in the governor's seat?
Yeah.
And it's never really come up because we've never really had this
switch.
We've always had 8-year handoffs, and so there's a lot of speculation about will they try to come into session right after New Year's Day and have a couple session weeks and do some of these big things like liquor store reform, pension reform.
But again, Amy Worden, they didn't do it in 4 years.
Right. How are they going to do it now? But for now, at least, no session days are scheduled yet. I checked. So, and the sense I get from talking to sources is no, probably not. I don't think that there's a real appetite. That would be so, and that would subject them to so much intense criticism.
And every bill is gone. They would have to reintroduce every single piece of legislation, take it through the process. And now and I know they can fast track when they want to fast track.
Well, you know what it would mean? It would mean that December would be sort of like a June in terms of like a lot of behind the scenes negotiations, so they could get these packages ready to roll when they hit the door in January.
Yeah.
I don't. Time will tell if this thing gets legs or not.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's not likely to happen, and I think trying to do it in a lame, whatever that would be, a lame duck.
Premature duck?
Yeah, premature, whatever it is. Anyway, thanks for coming in. Good update. All right, coming up, we're going to get an energy update from the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. We'll take a look at the state of the coal industry in this state and the nation, and we'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back to the program. We're going to do a little energy update with John Pippy. He's a former state senator from Allegheny County. Have I got that right?
That's correct, yes.
He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. Before we begin, let's sort of set the stage for our discussion. Take me through the significance today that coal has in terms of supplying energy to our state, so we have a perspective before we move ahead.
Coal is the largest supplier of electricity for our state. We represent about 40 to 42%, depending on how cold it is on any given.
And it's cold right now.
It's cold right now, so that number will probably go up. We have about 36,000 employees, $4.5 billion economically to our state. It has a tremendous involvement in for every 5 railroad jobs, one of them is directly related to coal. We have the second largest inland port in Pittsburgh because of coal. So we're a critical element when you talk about the total economy for the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, as we hear this thing, I hear it all the time, clean coal, a debate about whether it's clean or not. Right. Do I got that about right? And you've been through this, right?
Many times.
The pros and the cons, But before we get into where this is going, let's make sure that we're all starting from the same point. What's clean coal mean?
Well, when I talk about clean coal, what we talk about is just like the gasoline in your car. The type of engine that you use to burn that gasoline gives you get better mileage, less emissions. Coal's the same way. The coal hasn't changed much, but the way we mine it, the way we transport it, and the way we burn it for electricity has changed significantly to the point where a coal power plant built today is 95% cleaner than one built in the 50s, 60s. Just like your car today, my car gets 28 miles per gallon, where that type of car before would probably have gotten 12 to 13. So clean coal is all about the technology that you use, and through more efficiency, you can get more energy for less emissions.
And the carbon emissions are less, is that your point?
Well, yes, on the newer power plants. And that's really the challenge here in some of the debate. Some environmentalists have tried to shift the debate from clean coal from emissions to strictly CO2 carbon. And as a fossil fuel, coal has a significant carbon footprint. But even then, if you use a new coal power plant, you can get between 20 and 30% improvement on those emissions as well.
Okay. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about something called Clean Power Plan and what that means and why folks should care. Okay, we'll run to a break. When we come back, we'll take that up in our energy update on Pennsylvania Newsmakers.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back. Well, we're chatting with John Pippy. He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. We're talking about that aspect of energy. We've done lots of energy shows, dealing with various forms of it. We're taking a look today with coal. There's something called the Clean Power Plan that is fairly controversial. First of all, go through the ingredients of it for our viewers.
Okay, so when we're talking about the EPA's quote, and I'll use quotations, Clean Power Plan, what we're talking about is the most recent EPA proposal to deal with emissions from existing power plants and existing energy creator sources. So coal's a big part of it, but here in Pennsylvania, coal, nuclear, and natural gas account for over 95% of our energy, just those three alone. The challenge with the Clean Power Plan, and from a lot of things that are coming from Washington, is if it was reasonable, there would probably still be some controversy, but people wouldn't be able to argue that it's not achievable with given technology. And that's our argument right now, is these standards are set so high that you cannot...
So there's no technology. Are you saying there's no technology at the moment?
For commercially available coal-fired power plants, there is no way the Pennsylvania can meet the goals achieved and still maintain a significant coal fleet, a coal power generation perspective. And I had already told you that coal represents over 40% of our power, so that now you start to talk about reliability and pricing. And this isn't my analysis. Department of Environmental Protection, our own Pennsylvania DEP, said that if this plan goes through, that by 2030, we will have a 70% reduction in coal utilization. That's a big number. And we don't have plans to grow and replace that with others. Renewables are part of it, but they were only 5%.
Now, EPA is doing this on its own by regulation, not by Congress. Is that right? And that's created some controversy in Congress too. Am I right?
I think that's the biggest frustration with this plan is that much of what's coming out of Washington right now is through the regulatory bureaucratic process.
Right.
And many of the components in this, quote, plan that they are proposing come from proposals that have failed in the Democratic-run Congress in 2010, such as a lot of the issues associated with the carbon and enforcing carbon emissions and enforcing us to try to go into carbon banks, et cetera. So it's a challenge. What we're saying is we can be, if through reasonable regulation, you can achieve a lot of the goals. For example, here in Pennsylvania, without this plan, we will see a 27% reduction in carbon emissions from 2005 to 2020, 27% reduction. Now, the interesting side note is that the president just recently was in China and is shooting for a 26% reduction nationally. So in a reasonable world, we would get credit for all the work we've already done, and they would leave us alone. But that's not the case. They want us to go to 42% under the Clean Power Plan, and we can't get there and still keep the diverse portfolio we have. Yeah.
Now, is there any evidence or any indication that the EPA is willing to relook at that and maybe lower? Obviously, reducing them over time is desirable. Is it the question for you, the speed with which this is occurring and the fact that, as you point out, the technology isn't there at the moment?
Yes, there's a lot of independent organizations have done an analysis of the bill, and I'm talking about groups like the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, the New England ISO, which just kind of like the PJM interchange that handles Pennsylvania and many of our neighboring states' power, have also said there are some concerns with the speed of which these regulations are being implemented and the level. And that's really the issue, is we just need to bring this debate back to the middle, have all sides, bring their information, and then have adults come up with a plan that's achievable and has intermediate goals. This isn't the debate like of the 1980s and 70s where we're like, either or. There should be.
Either or, yeah.
As a matter of fact, the world right now, and I'm an engineer, so I like numbers. We use about, I think it's 20.
I'm a pollster, I like numbers.
22 million terawatts, 22,000 terawatts, and that's a big number, is what the world's using roughly right now, 2013. By 2035, so in less than 20 years, we're going to need 40,000, so almost double the amount of energy the world's going to need. Right now, every other country is looking to coal, not every, but the majority of the world is looking to coal to provide a big portion of that. But that also still allows for plenty of room for renewables, for nuclear, for natural gas, for oil. So it's not as if we have to pick and choose. And that's really where I hope the debate goes back to.
So your point is, before I let you go, is that let's do it, but let's do it in a way that is efficient, in a way that allows us to keep the system, the grid supplying it, and the technology to catch up.
Exactly.
Do I got that about right?
Yeah, which is what most market-based systems do, unless you inject politics, and that's our concern, is that it's being driven by politics.
All right, well, thanks for coming in for the update, and we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.